Neat Nation, welcome back to the Drew P. Whiskey Show, where today I'm going to take on a topic that I was encouraged to take on by my good friend Brian Bikey. I'm going to talk about my top whiskeys of the year. Now, I'm not going to do this in a taste them off, what's the best way. Well, that would be interesting. I actually may very well do that on Instagram or something. But what I wanted to do is keep this somewhat brief. If I tasted through it, it would take me literally an hour to go through. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spare you the hour. I'm going to try and keep this in the standard 20-minute range. And what I'm going to do is talk through my top whiskeys and try and explain why they are in my list. I have not counted these, so TBD on how many there are. I will talk about the ones I think that are the best, the ones that just kind of blow away the other ones in terms of flavor profile. But I wanted to be inclusive in the list because the ones that are the best are certainly not necessarily the most accessible. There are some accessible whiskeys in this list. What's qualifying these whiskeys for me is, were they really rad? Were they unique? Or were they awesome? Or were they really good and a really, really good value? So buckle up, pour yourself something good. I've got a Four Roses single barrel here, a 9-year, 5-month OBSV that it's just doing it for me. I love this. I love the OBSV recipe. My glass is dirty. And this particular barrel is a hitter, for sure. Is it in my list? No, because I felt like that would be just too easy. So hopefully you got your whiskey. Now let's do this thing. The first whiskey I want to talk about is a barrel pick that we did. And this was what my top craft whiskey of the year. This is Starlight Distillery Distillate Double Barrel Rye. So it's twice oaked, cask strength, 5-year-old rye. And it's really, really good. And I wanted to include this in my list because Starlight does a lot of really, really cool finishing stuff. And a lot of craft distilleries are. So I definitely think if a group in your area or a store is doing a Starlight pick and they picked a really cool barrel, like a honey barrel whiskey or a double oaked rye or a whatever Starlight calls their cigar batch, or a cognac finished rye, like odds are pretty good that that's solid stuff if your group has good palates at all. So I would definitely keep your eye open, your eyes on what Starlight is doing, because this rye is so freaking good. And actually, if you live in Wisconsin and you wanted to taste what is in this bottle, we got half the barrel. Somebody else in Wisconsin got the other half, and there's still a few bottles on the shelf. So hit me up on Instagram in my DMs at Drew P. Whiskey if you want to know where you can get that. The second whiskey and the third whiskey I'm going to talk about together, and that is SourcedMGP products from small distilleries, but it's not the same old stuff. A few off-the-radar distilleries, particularly like Dancing Goat, are sitting on MGP distillate and aging it in their own warehouses. That's pretty cool. So while the days of 12-year-old Old Scout or 10-year-old or whatever, or the Bellmead single barrels that were so popular, while those days are long gone, the days of killer MGP are not long gone. For instance, here's an 8-year-old MGP pick that we did with Dancing Goat Distillery. It's available right now on Sealbox. Maybe right now. If it lasts the weekend, it'll be available. And I'm going to throw the link down below. If you want 8-year-old MGP 21% rye for $60, you can still get it in some places. My friends at Dancing Goat are freaking awesome, and we've done some pretty killer picks. 2 barrels so far. 1 more barrel likely coming February-ish. So don't sleep on SourcedMGP. If you're getting it from the right place, can still be a pretty killer value. And the picks that we got from Dancing Goat are, again, really solid. But I'm going to move on from our picks. One other thing I picked up, and this is just something I got rolling through Kentucky, is a wheated bourbon. This is also SourcedMGP from Boone County. This one cost me $100. So it's an 8-year-old cask strength wheated bourbon from MGP. Granted, not the value that the Dancing Goat one was, but this to me is why you should stop at distilleries, as many of them as you can, and just see what they're offering that day. My brother and I were on our way to Cincinnati, through Cincinnati up to, not Cleveland. What's the other city in Ohio where we went? Where Middle West Spirits is. Anyway, we're going to middle of Ohio. Oof. And we stopped through Boone County, which is southwest of Cincinnati, northeast of Louisville. And they had this particular barrel on the shelves. And dang, it may be the best wheated bourbon that I have on the shelf. I actually plan to taste it up against some of the Killer Makers releases. And then Weller 107, because those are the best wheated bourbons that I have. I think this one might take the cake. So, again, it's not always the limited releases from the big distilleries that are crushing it. Some of the small, often you get off the beaten path, you might find something great. A lot of these craft distilleries, craft whiskeys, I found because I'd committed this year to taste 100 different craft whiskeys. While that was an arduous task at times, and it could not have been done without the massive support from Nation, I found some really, really killer places and some really, really killer whiskeys. Some of them sourced, some of them the own distillate of the distiller, and it was definitely a worthwhile task. I encourage you to look out that way because I tell you, I think the limited releases from the big distilleries are not going to get easier to find. I mean, they've just been getting harder and harder and harder to find over the last 5 to 10 years, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. So go find your own place to support that releases killer stuff that matches the profile you dig. Now I am going to talk, though, about some larger distilleries, though I have to, because I'm an enthusiast, and I chase this stuff like the rest of you. Whiskey of the year for me, this is the first year that I tried this, was killer value and consistent and delicious. Knob Creek 1200 proof Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. It hits. It's not terribly refined. It's fairly simple, but it's a good value. It's got a great age statement, and it's got a, again, really, really killer taste profile. I just went deep on Knob Creek. Big deep dive on the Knob Creek brand. I'm going to throw the link to that show down in the notes below. You should watch that one. I talk about Knob 12 as well as the Knob 15, which is new from this year, which is also very, very good. But Knob 12 is on the list because great profile, great age statement, great value for those things. Next up, Elijah Craig barrel proof single barrels. This is a new product this year. Did not hit shelves until 2021. So we're in 2022. We're talking about whiskeys from last year. Okay, right? Cool. The first one of these I had and still have didn't really do it for me. Kind of tasted like Booker's, which isn't really my jam. That said, this one is quite a bit better. And thanks to our boy Fred, we were able to taste 3 other Elijah Craig single barrels. And my goodness, some of them are quite good. So I was excited for the line. I was excited to see, are these Elijah Craig single barrels things I should seek out, things I should accumulate maybe in the same way that I do Four Roses picks, in the way that I've started to with Russell's Reserve single barrel picks? And the answer now is yes. I mean, these are generally showing up in the $75 to $90 price point. That's probably fair. I did hear about a couple today that were released at $125, and I was like, dang, that's probably where we're headed. But that's a little bit crazy. They're not that good, but they're really good. So I'm pleased with these releases. I love that Elijah Craig dropped their picks now at barrel strength. That's huge. Hats off to Old Forester for being one of the bigger distilleries to do that first. Of course, Four Roses has been doing it forever, but it seems like everybody's getting on this barrel strength single barrel release train, and I'm here for it with the Elijah Craig. Talked about this one a lot. Maker's Mark FAE 02. I mean, FAE 01 was released in 2021 and was quite good. But the whiskey that won my Maker's Mark taste-off, which included SE4 PR5 and Maker's Mark 46 cask strength, was the FAE 02 that took the cake. One thing I got to say about my whiskeys is you'll notice that they all have decent age statements or good age profiles. So even the Starlight... Even the Starlight 5-year-old double oaked rye has a pretty good age profile because it's double oaked. This FAE 02 is probably the most viscous and oaky, like age communicating mark product that I've had, and my goodness, it was quite good. So This may very well be the top wheated bourbon that I have, or it may be this Boone County. Again, we'll find out eventually, but these are also killer values at 60 to 70 bucks at the most for these Makers private releases. I'll also link the Makers taste off I did in the show notes below. Lots of content for you if you're new to the channel. Okay, just a few more. Next one, again, not a surprise, and also carrying a lot of age character, is the Remus Repeal Reserve Batch 5. I mean, this is what, 13 to 16-year-old whiskey, again at $80 to $90, killer value. I bought a couple of these, only one at a time, but a few, because it's really, really good. If you like a well-aged bourbon, a bourbon that carries a lot of oak, a lot of sweetness, some nice fruit notes, it's hard to go wrong with this one. I've been preaching the gospel of Batch 5 to my friend Brian Bikey at Abandoned Bourbon for quite some time, and I think he's finally converted. Unfortunately, it's not really on the shelf anymore. All the other Remus Repeal Reserve batches lasted on the shelf for a while. This one, because of the high age, which was declared on the front of the label here, didn't really last on the shelf that long, and the profile backed it up. So this to me should be really in anybody's conversation about top whiskeys of the year, based on flavor profile, but based on value. And if I didn't mention, it's MGP, so it's 13 to 16-year-old MGP. If that came in a single barrel from an Old Scout, an OKI, a Boone County, or anybody else, like, the initial retail price would be $150 or more, and the secondary value would be bonkers. I don't know why the Remus brand has been so sluggish to take off. It's like tater probs. 2 left, and these ones are really in the list because, gosh, they were so good. All these other ones pretty killer values for sure, and as somebody who lives in Wisconsin who doesn't have access to a lot of the limited stuff, value means a lot to me. Accessibility means a lot to me. These other 2 were less accessible, but I was very fortunate to get them. We'll start with Bardstown Bourbon Company Discovery Series Batch 4. So this was released at the very start of this year, and it carries 10-year-old, 13-year-old, and 15-year-old Kentucky bourbon, and it drinks like a very high-end limited release should. Not too dissimilar from a George T. Stagg. I mean, it's not George T. Stagg. The proof isn't that high. We're talking 115 proof. But the profile is delightful and is full of old Kentucky bourbon. MSRP on this was like $120 to $130, and you could get it. I mean, it was around. I picked it up both in Kentucky and in Wisconsin, so that's pretty cool. And I know a lot of people were able to get this if they were looking for it. There was a decent amount of this whiskey released. Right after Disco Batch 4, Batches 5, 6, and I think 7 all include Tennessee whiskey, so this is kind of the last one to include only Indiana or Kentucky sourced bourbons, and it kind of shows in the profile. Really, really fantastic whiskey from people who do great things with sourcing and blending at Bardstown. And the last one is just awesome. Like, I think, if I'm just going off memory, it was my favorite whiskey that I tried this year. And I was just very fortunate to get one of the very few bottles that made it to Wisconsin, and that is the Russell's Reserve 13. What makes this one so cool, of course, the 13 years oldness, the cask strengthness, but also that when this was released, its price point was $80, right? Which is insane. Like, you know, the Master's Keep stuff is all released at 140, 150, 180 in some cases. And then Campari just releases Russell's 13 at cask strength, non-chill filtered, I might add. And amazing, delicious. I've heard a lot of people say this was overhyped. It's hard to overhype a whiskey that's this good, that has this good of specs, for $80. Yeah, it's impossible to overhype it. It's just that good. So again, very inaccessible, very hard to get. I understand that this is at the top of a lot of people's lists for best whiskey of the year, Fred Minnick included, but it's also at the top of mine. Again, I didn't taste off all these. I'm just going off the ones that kind of really stood out to me. But Russell's 13 was just phenomenal. Before I hang up, one bonus round here. I don't want to step on the glass. The Willet Madeira finish blackened. So blackened brand, bottling Willet rye, 6-ish years old, finished in Madeira. This was cool. I really like this release. It was expensive, which is probably why it's not in this other stuff, as the value is kind of wonky for me. But I don't have another product like this, and it was a way that I could get something, I talked about this before, that's kind of like Willet Family Estate-ish, without paying Willet Family Estate prices, because a 6-year-old cast strength finished rye under the Willet Family Estate brand, number one, would never show up in Wisconsin. Number two, would retail about $200. Number three, would fly off the shelf so fast that I'd have to pay secondary prices, which I no longer do. So yeah. So this was a way that I could get a product I would otherwise never have been able to get, just because it's under the Blackened brand. And same as Russell's 13, I've had people say, like, it's not worth the money. Like, well, maybe not. But if you could, like, consider it as a Willet Family Estate product, which maybe you should or maybe you shouldn't, it actually changes the value conversation quite a bit. At least it does in my mind. Okay, I have to clean up the mess here. Hope you guys enjoyed that little ride. I think I do plan to actually line up a few of my absolute favorite whiskeys from the year, just taste through them blind, just to do a little, like, okay, but which one actually is the best? That means I'd have to pop this Discovery 4, though, which I've kind of been saving. We'll see. But either way, stay tuned to the Droopy Whiskey channel. A lot more fun stuff coming. I have some banked Kentucky content, like my review of the Willet tour and of the bar at Willet, which is just so good. I should probably make a video about that, because I've done the work. I just need to produce the video. Maybe soon, y'all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to follow along, catch stuff in the future. Appreciate you watching. Your time is valuable, so thank you very much. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep it neat.